Welcome to the third season of the Global Architect Alliance podcast with your founder, Jason Boyle. This season, we are going to be asking architects in countries around the globe, what is it really like to practice architecture in these countries? Over the season, we will uncover the differences and similarities to practicing the profession of architecture between different continents, countries and regions. Our second location is Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Please share, subscribe and comment to support the channel. Now a word from our sponsors.
Sounds for Sleeping is a new dedicated YouTube and Instagram channel with relaxing ASMR videos to help you relax, study or sleep. Please see links in this podcast for free sounds ranging from 1 hour to 10 hours of sounds.
Okay, welcome to the third season of the Global Architect Alliance, and our second guest is none other than Sandra Woodall. Good morning.
Morning, Jason. Thank you for having me.
Could I just ask you to sort of please introduce yourself and also tell me where you're located in the world, and also how long have you been in your current country?
Yeah, certainly. I'm design director of Tangram Architects and Designers MENA Studio, and I'm based in Dubai, where I've lived and worked for the last over 25 years now. I think to describe me, I'm usually described as a passionate environmentalist, architect, urbanist, researcher, and mentor. I'm a fellow of the Royal Institute of British Architects, and also an academician of the Academy of Urbanism in the UK, which is an old-fashioned term for fellow, but we're a modern institute. So here in Dubai, where I live and work, I'm the UAE country representative on the RIBA Gulf chapter committee. So I represent the interest of architects, perhaps from the largest contingent of architects out here in the Gulf, the UAE country. And of course, I instill the virtues of RIBA qualified members to the clients and the developers and anybody who will listen to me as we represent the RIBA in the region.
No, that's wonderful. And, a fairly standard question, but, just take me back as how did you qualify to become an architect? It's probably a fairly easy one to answer, but I'm also interested in how architects within the UAE would qualify too.
Yeah. I think qualifying as an architect it was very unexpected for me from my background. I effectively grew up in what was a defunct pit village on the South Lancashire coalfield back in the 1970s. So people like me didn't become architects. People like me didn't actually go to university. So there was no expectations whatsoever as I was growing up for such a grand and great profession. But I had drive. I knew what I wanted to be. I think by the time I was 11 years old, I designed my very first building and drawn the plans and everything. Probably only made sense to me, and they probably still do today. But that's so from the early days, I knew what I wanted to do. I went off to college to study A-levels. It was the grandly named Wigan and District Mining and Technical College. When I was 16, I headed there, and I met what was to be someone who transformed my perception of what I was able to do. And she really was a role model and a fabulous mentor who showed me nothing was impossible. My first day at college, I signed up for the O-level as well as the A-level. I'd signed up for the O-level in computing, which wasn't offered in schools those days because computers were so expensive, the server rooms were so big, we were only privileged enough to be able to access it at college. And my teacher was Mary Barnes. She was a pioneer, really. In the 60s, she'd worked in computing in Manchester. And during the first or second week, she actually offered if I wanted to transfer across to Manchester to work at the National Computer Centre. So she actually believed in me, and she showed me I could do anything. I was set in my ways. I knew I wanted to be a designer. I knew I wanted to be an architect. So then I questioned, are A-levels correct for me? Is it the right way? Is it the right pathway? And I was fortunate at the college. We had alternative courses, and I was able, within the first few weeks, to transfer across to the BTEC course in building studies, which really gave me a fantastic background in understanding all aspects of architecture, all the way through from, we had courses in quantity surveying and structures, in mechanics, and everything. I got an entire précis of the entire built environment profession in those 2 short years at college. So when I graduated that, I went off and I studied at the Scott Sutherland School of Architecture up in Aberdeen. I went to London to do my year out for my part 1, and then again I stepped away from the norm. And while I was doing my year out in London, my company offered to sponsor me for the remainder of my studies, pay for me to go to university on a part-time basis, and to qualify doing my part 2 and part 3 at universities across London who offered a part-time course, which is a course, quite a recent thing that the RIBA is offering these days, where students of backgrounds who need to continue to earn as they learn can do so. So it's not quite as new as what it's being packaged up to be these days, because that's the way I studied over 30 years ago now. So I didn't have a conventional pathway into architecture, but I knew from the outset what I wanted to do and how to get there. And because of my background, doing the normal, straightforward route really never occurred to me, basically, because I wasn't the normal, straightforward kind of student or practitioner when I eventually got there. So
it's so funny as well, because I did the same route as you. So I did the BTEC in construction and learned all of the things that you did. And, you know, I come from a working class background as well from Darlington. So
yeah,
very similar in some ways. And
there's not many of us though, is there?
No.
Jason, not that many who took that route. It was hard, but it was worth it. And well,
so
small world.
It is a small world. And so the people, you know, you're a British architect trained, and you've come to the UAE. But how do most qualify there? Is it a case of studying within their own country or going abroad to study? That's.
Yeah, I think that the vast majority of people in the UAE, they come from all over the world. So we have so many different backgrounds and educational opportunities. To be an architect in the UK, whether you're RIBA or even to be ARB registered, you need to study for 5 years, practice for 2 years before you're even considered as being qualified as an architect. In other countries of the world, that isn't the case. So we have many different kinds of people with different kinds of backgrounds. What is important is everyone has architect on their degree award. So that generally qualifies them as architects in their own countries. When we arrive in the UAE, typically we would join the Society of Engineers, and if they accredit your background as being equal to the architect status here, then you'll be eligible for membership. But not everyone needs to join the Society of Engineers. We have such a different and diverse pool of staff. I mean, at one point, the company I'm with, Tangram, a few years ago, we did a survey, and in the studio we had 19 different nationalities, and we spoke 27 different languages. So it's a very diverse marketplace, the UAE, much more so perhaps than probably anywhere else you can find in the world. So it's very different backgrounds and very different ways of getting here.
Okay, no, that's wonderful, and I did not understand that fully. So I really appreciate the complexity as well, and I'm guessing the common language is English. That's just my guess.
It's typically, yes, that's the working language.
Yeah.
You're often dealing with people who have English as a second or even as a third language. So communication has to be, you have to be very cognizant of that. And even the English language, using certain terms in English, they can have different meanings. I mean, for example, certainly in the construction world, where we come from, when we're organizing a project, etc., we talk in terms of a program being the timeline for the deliverables and the tasks, and the programming it is a timescale. Other nationalities use program to equate to being the content of the scheme rather than the timeline of delivering the scheme. So you have to, the slight nuances like that you learn to live with over time, and make sure you clarify what you're saying when you say it, to make sure everyone understands what the terminology being used actually means. Just get some common ground going.
No, absolutely. Okay, my next question as well. This is obviously a hot debate within the UK, and and we have the Arabia salary index for salaries. So I'm just kind of wondering, in the UAE, what would be an average salary? And I guess it comes down to sort of experience. So, and if you can caveat it with saying someone 5 years or 10 years experience, that would be interesting. It's just an average.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible here for one reason. There's no guidelines. There's no regulations. There's no necessarily direct correlation of what the term architect means. And when you're in the workplace, when you're working as an architect, there are so many different kinds of tasks that architects do. Some will concentrate only on this side of things. We have architects in our studio who work day in, day out producing 3D renders, so 3D modeling, 3D rendering. And they're architects, but they only concentrate on one task. So it's very difficult to say there's an average salary, because there is no average architect, and there never will be, I don't think.
No, that's absolutely fine. And again, I did not know that. So I guess the salary would be dependent on, I guess, what it is you would actually be doing as an architect more. Yes. So if you were looking after a huge project with a team of architects, I'm guessing you would command a higher salary, but it's...
Yeah, absolutely. There's the different scales within the studio it's for the amount of responsibility and that you take on. So you're rewarded for that in terms of salary terms. A difference here between here and the UK certainly is that our salaries here are tax-free. So whatever we earn in country, we don't pay tax on it. So that's an added incentive usually for most people to join the workforce in the UAE.
Yeah, it's very much so an incentive, very much so. Okay, my next question is then, again, it's hard to ask specifics, but in a general sense, what sort of software do you use to design your buildings through all the different stages?
Well, personally, I start off with a pen and a piece of paper, and I rarely personally move from that. But I have a team of people who do many other things and take the design from the ideas from what I put on paper through to all the different stages. I think so. We're up to date here. We use BIM. So we moved from predominantly using AutoCAD to using Revit a few years ago now. Then a lot of emphasis here is at the early stage is on the 3D work, having a 3D depiction or a walkthrough, a fly-through, whatever, so that you can communicate with your clients what the scheme is from early on. I think it probably stems from as we touched on earlier, the communication skills. So instead of using words, if we show it in pictures, there's less room for misunderstanding of what the term actually means between the different cultures, I suppose. Yeah. So for example, for all the time I've been working here, we've always had strong 3D representation of our work from the very early stages, to the extent that, for example, we've never really used, I suppose SketchUp has never been a big thing in our office, because it doesn't really have enough detail and enough glitz and gloss to show a client that that's exactly what we're talking about. It leaves too much interpretation in the idea as it goes across. So I say for sure we wouldn't use SketchUp basically. And then, of course, these days, as technology is moving on, we started using artificial intelligence to design our program, because not only, we're using designs we've got strong strengths doing sustainability and delivering sustainable schemes across the region, and we have for the last couple of decades now. And as an exponent of sustainability, we've started now to look at what parts of the building footprint, so the carbon footprint, the cost footprint, the physical footprint, to reduce water use, to reduce waste. We're looking to strip back that from our building footprints, and to look at where we can use more advanced technologies now and office spaces which are based in the metaverse, so that we don't need a physical built part of the scheme. So now we're using, we work in healthcare, so we do hospital designs, et cetera, and medtech has really, the trajectory of medtech is innovation has really been enhanced over the last very recent years. And all our clients there have sort of new digital identities. And so they're bringing the next generation of telemedicine and robotic process automations and technology into their buildings. So as building designers, we need to stand up and design our buildings to the next generation to meet these. So now we're also looking at artificial intelligence for our designs, and machine learning, et cetera, so we can deliver our spaces in a different way from what we have in the past, and embrace this digital identity and take it forward. I think we can create much better immersive experiences for the building's end users by not taking them into a physically built space, but by creating a virtual reality space where they can become immersed. The spaces we're designing in the metaverse, I mean, it's enhanced from what we can do here physically, because the metaverse doesn't have the same constraints we have here. So we're using artificial intelligence such as, I suppose, we try and use open platforms, open AI platforms, so the availability and affordability, of course. And because it's early days, we're still trying to get to grips with which is the best for what solution we're looking for. So essentially we're looking at image diffusion models, so such as Imagen, Stable Diffusion, DALL-E, Midjourney. Midjourney is the new kid on the block. And they all offer different there's a different interface uses. There's different ways of technically they're embedded or where they're embedded in the programming, and also from a designer point of view, we get different resolutions from the different platform of AI that we use.
Yeah.
So we had a steep learning curve with that to try and work out which is best for us. And I think Midjourney recently has just brought out a much more human to computer upgrade. So the problem for us when we get an AI produced image, an NFT, say, it's not that easy to go in and modify it, manipulate it to the way you want it. Oh, that's fantastic, but that top right-hand corner, really, we need to work on that. It's not that easy to tell a computer, oh, that top right-hand corner needs working on. But Midjourney now, I think they've just done an upgrade, so we're now looking to get to grips with that and to see if we can better direct what we're doing and better manage the outcome. So we're hoping that will take us forward in that, looking at that kind of software at the moment.
No, it's fantastic to hear that you're embracing AI as well. It's incredible, and it's the background is the sustainability side of things as well. I was interested in coming back away to your practice. You mentioned hospitality. Is that the main sort of focus of the practice? I'm just interested what different building types that your practice works on.
I think essentially I would say we do social infrastructure projects. So we've got a strong track record of delivering community-based or regional projects that healthcare, hospital laboratories, hospitality. We completed last summer. We completed our very first, I call it a beach resort on the Mediterranean in North Africa. Housing, there are a lot of housing, education, and urbanism. A lot of urbanism. So whether it's a community project, a neighborhood project, a city, or a regional project, we go across all the scales. And we work in, typically, majority of our work is for government organizations, and also in the defense sector, the security sector, and also the nuclear sector. So it's not run-of-the-mill developer projects that we deliver day after day. We don't really touch into that kind of aspect, and we don't really touch into the speculative aspect where we don't know who the end user is, and we don't know exactly what they need and how they need to improve what they do by altering the kind of environment that they're working within. And so we work with them to generate new ways of doing things by offering them buildings that offer them different things than what they've had in the past, and so that they can move forwards in the business trajectory and the workflows that they do.
No, absolutely fantastic. Of great interest, and I like the fact that you're working with intelligent clients. I think in them sort of typologies, which is great. And so following on from that is, then how does your practice win new work? Is it very much a sort of reputation thing? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, we have a strong reputation. We're known to our clients, and so repeat work is often quite a proportion of our work. In order to work with government clients, of course, you need to be on their approved lists. So you need to pre-qualify. You need to have typically you have to have existing experience in the type of work which they wish to consider you for. And then in some cases, we'll enter into a framework agreement where over the next 4 years, 5 years, whatever it is, we'll be on their approved list. And then there'll be a rolling program where they They invite you to bid with the other people, so it's a selected, invited tender, fee tender. Or in some cases, the fee tender would also require us to do some kind of design element, and so we'll be competing like on a competitive basis for the design work as well. The clients already understand our capabilities and our strengths and weaknesses, so the technical side of things, much of that is clarified before we get to the point where we're invited to tender on those kinds of clients. And then on the design, I mean, we entered the North African market on the back of an international open competition win. We won the design of it was a hotel resort with an aqua park in just to the west of Algiers in Algeria, right. The holiday resort called Zeralda. And we won the competition for this, and we got all the way through to working drawings. The project was shelved at the working drawing stage, but we beat many international teams to get into that. But because once we were in the country, once we were in with the client, we were able to look at other opportunities and access them through different routes. Because we were then established there, so which gave us much more than if we hadn't already been established. So then we were able to, again, invited from client lists to bid, get to know the private side of the client bases. So private clients, because we're working with government entities, are more likely to engage with you. And in North Africa, there's a lot of design and build work. So once you're known to the developers or the contractors who are being asked to do design and build contracts, then you'd be invited by the contractor to join them in order to deliver the scheme, etc. The hotel, the Mediterranean beach resort, was a design and build contract with China Harbour Engineering Company. So we go through very, very different methods, and we enter competitions. We enter competitions if we can see there's no reason why we're not going to win. We will enter a competition. Of the last 8 competitions we entered, we won 7. So we're not going to let. We use that as a means to get in, like I said, new markets or new clients, etc. So it's a good. It's time consuming. It costs you much more than getting on an approved list, etc. But it's much more worthwhile, and you can test your design flow as well at the same time. You can offer something that they haven't seen before and that other people are not going to come up with. So that's a fun and energetic side of things. People want to work on competitions. People want to get things that look fantastic out the door, and then use that as opening the door to talk to the client.
Yes.
Who doesn't always build it, but it opens doors for you.
No, thank you so much for that. Very interesting. It's so I guess you mentioned design and build, but and you work for the government. So I'm just interested in what contracts that you use on a sort of day-to-day basis with your projects.
Yeah, it's pretty for the traditional methods. So not design and build, but traditionally we use the FIDIC. We have done ever since we've been out here. It's a standard international contract for construction work. So that's the basis of certainly most of the project work we've ever done out here has been FIDIC based.
Okay, that's cool. And the other one, the next one is you're based in Dubai, and I'm just really interested in the environmental challenges that you're faced with in the country that you're designing, because you are very passionate about sustainability. It's
Yeah, no, it's very true, and it's a very, very challenging climate. It's a challenging place to work, and it's a challenging place to deliver schemes which are climatically responsible. What we need to do, when I first got out here, I was working on a large master plan project. It was the 5-year review of a citywide master plan. And so I was embedded, I lived in what was a more traditional desert urbanization and a desert community. So from the very outset, I really did gain an insight and a passion for exploring more desert urbanism and for the creation of climatically responsible designs. What works here in this locality? Challenges across the world with the climate challenge is we all have very similar challenges, but the actual solutions are going to be local and contextual because they have to relate to your individual needs, your individual context of the location that you're designing the building or the urban area for. Yeah. So during COVID, we were all stuck at home and trying to get things, trying to get on with things as best we could. During that time, we had a new chair of the RIBA Gulf chapter, and I was talking with him, and together we devised a plan to put together a sustainable development series here in the Gulf across the GCC, which would look at the United Nations SDGs and come up with workshops, toolkits, case studies, all the knowledge and skills and tools needed to deliver regional buildings, regional urban areas that respond to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So to deliver it on our terms from the UAE, the Gulf perspective. And so we set up that originally, it was online. We set up webinars, and we invited people from across the world, across the region, from different countries in the Gulf to give their experiences. What are they working on now that's working? What are they working on now that addresses this? From the climate and the context, the culture, the economics, and the marketplace that we're working in. And so that had a very wide audience. And now, obviously, post-pandemic, we started to be able to have live meetups, live gatherings, live discussions, live panels to discuss and talk wider in groups of people specifically across the region. I think we've got COP27 coming up in just under 3 weeks, I guess it is now. So to align with COP Week, here in Dubai, we'll be working with Dubai Design Week at D3, the design district, and we'll be holding a series of panel discussions across the week, touching on sustainability, on health and well-being, and on architectural education for regional responses. And then shortly after that, we'll be doing a tour of there's a new headquarters complex just recently been completed in Sharjah by Zaha Hadid Architects, the BIHA headquarters. BIHA is a local waste to energy company. So it's a brand new company being set up in Sharjah to deliver energy that's generated from waste. And this is the headquarters building. And Zaha Hadid Architects, there'll be a group of people from their London office coming out to visit the building. And we hope to run a live broadcast of the tour of the building as we're going around. So that hopefully should be, if we can get that organised in time, that'll be advertised, and the RIBA, the Sustainable Development Group, will be running that as a webinar for everyone to join and see online.
Fantastic, so, absolutely fantastic. Okay, the next one is the cultural side of things, and so. What cultural issues do you encounter on a day-to-day basis when designing and constructing buildings?
Yeah, of course, it's such a mix of cultures here. If we look at the traditional Emirati culture, and the way that society works, the way that people interact with each other over the from the past, the traditional way of doing things. In terms of the built environment, the first cultural change I found when I got here was spaces had to be much bigger, because they were originally, if you had a waiting room in a health centre, you'd need a male waiting room and then a female waiting room. Right. And then somewhere in the centre, that's where we would place the children's waiting room with the children play area, etc., etc. So spaces tend to be duplicated more here, perhaps, than certainly in the West that we would find. So that was the first thing that would affect the building and the building sizes, etc. The second way is that it's a very Asian mindset here. So people think collectively rather than thinking individually, which we perhaps do more of in the West. So it's I'm not saying one size fits all, but if one size can be made to suit the majority of people, then that's better than creating many individual examples to deal with many numbers of people. So that was another thing that we culturally you need to get to grips with and you can do quite early on. So it's some things are very different, but you get used to them. And if you ask me now, I can't think of that many examples, but I'm sure there have been over the last couple of decades. It's just that for me now, I'm embedded, I'm immersed in this, so it's kind of normalized for me now. I understand how to balance the two, perhaps. I think, there's definitely differences, and people will find differences here. But I think the expectations are more different than what the reality is. Often, people from the UK, from Europe have asked, can you drive in the UAE? You're a woman, are you allowed to work? And all this kind of thing. I think expectations and reality don't generally meet in those kind of, all the worries you have at the start. Let's move forward. Everyone's here together. Everyone's working together. Yes. For everybody, we all work together and we make it work, basically.
The next question I have for you is, are you a member of a professional body? I think you mentioned that in your introduction. So I'm interested in how being a member of a professional body helps you in your day-to-day practice.
Yes. I'm with the Royal Institute of British Architects. I have been for all my career. I'm also with the Academy of Urbanism. During my career, I joined the Association of Project Management in the UK. I think helping with the career, first of all, it sets you out at a standard. So if someone knows you're an RIBA, registered architect, they know the standard, or certainly in the UK or in the West, they know what the standard of the RIBA architect is. Here we have varying standards of architects because they have very different backgrounds and very different requirements as to what classifies them as an architect. So it's definitely the RIBA International and the RIBA Gulf chapter have been working out here. And in fact, RIBA International opened its first office outside of the UK here in the UAE about 3 years ago. And the RIBA Gulf chapter opened here 12 years ago or so. And so from that side of the profession, the understanding of what an RIBA architect is growing. And so that's helping us to deliver the message of the expectations and to manage expectations more. So as that grows wide and gets wider and wider, it will help our clients to understand who we are and what who they're appointing when they appoint the RIBA. We're RIBA International Chartered Practice, so that gives us an added badge of what standard we do work to. From the architect point of view, on the other side of the fence, so from the members' point of view, the RIBA, as I say, we're trying to be much more of a regional resource, something that our chartered members can look to see what is the latest tools that can be used, what is the latest thinking that's happening on this topic or that topic. Talk to each other, so we can liaise and talk to each other through the chapter events and through the webinars that we post. We have town hall meetings, etc., etc. So everyone is given the opportunity to contribute and to ask questions and to raise awareness and gain their own awareness. The Academy of Urbanism is a fantastic resource for urbanists everywhere. Their website has lots of resources on there that's useful. The Academy normally has an urbanism hour, which is a webinar held typically every month, once a month, a Friday lunchtime at the end of the month. And so people can engage, see what's happening across urbanists across Europe, primarily UK based, but it does deliver a lot that's going on in Europe and occasionally across the world. So again, you can keep up to date with what's happening, what regulations are being changed across the world, so that you can look, for us here in the UAE, we can look to the best standards in the world and look how we can adapt them to our own uses here, because we're not, it's not as prescribed here. We don't have to follow the British standards like you would in the UK. We have local standards, and then we can look, does the American standard give us anything extra? Does the Australian standard give us anything extra, et cetera, et cetera? Yeah. So when you have regulations, essentially, you're being told by the regulating body that this is the minimum standard that you are required by law to meet. Yeah. You don't have to just leave it there at the minimum standard. So resources like the RIBA, they've got a fantastic collection of all the webinars, etc., on their YouTube channel, and then they have a resource section, so people can go into the website and find information. And I think the RIBA has just recently set up a members hub where we can talk to each other and ask questions, etc. From the HQ in UK, that's been set up. Association project management, exactly the same. We can access things now, webinars online, so we can access from anywhere in the world, and they have a resource center on their website. So it's very, very useful to keep up to date with what's happening and how it can be delivered, which is key for any architect, really. The how to do things, the case studies, the tools, etc., that are available for us to use, and of course, especially when it's open source, then anyone can access it, or you can access it for a minimum cost, and it does help you in your daily work, your daily life.
No, so, I'm glad you mentioned. In the UK building regulations, that it is a minimum standard, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think a lot of clients don't really understand that. It is a minimum standard, so fantastic.
Same everywhere in the world, yes, not just the UK.
Yeah,
the standards, the regulations are the minimum standards. And we, as designers, we don't have to aspire to achieve minimum, do we?
No, absolutely, no. Yeah, okay. Thank you for that. The next question I had is, where do you stand on, the long working hours culture that exists in the profession? It's a topic I think that it's been very talked about a lot especially in the UK. It's been talked about, and so I'm just really interested in your perspective. And I don't know how many days a week you're expected to work, by the way.
It depends. I mean, our standard office hours are 5 days a week. If we're on government contracts and the contract is on site, then it's 6 days a week. By the contract we have with the government, etc. Here in the Gulf, it's quite, and in the UAE, it's quite. Some countries work, and the weekend is Friday and Saturday off. In the UAE, it's Saturday, Sunday off, and in Sharjah, which is a large emirate in the UAE, it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. So they have a 4-day week. I think the long working hours for architecture, I think it's no different for law or medicine or any other professions like that. I think basically I would say that no matter how many hours I work, I don't have enough hours to do what I want to do, to do what I want to achieve. And architecture profession, it's probably more topical because we don't necessarily receive the same level of pay as they do in law or in medicine, perhaps. So I think that's maybe where most of we're disaligned with other professions. But if we were in teaching, we'd be doing long hours. Yeah, if we worked in a factory, we've got long hours of hard work. It's just, I think for architects, it's difficult to deliver everything you want to do in the timescales that we're given. The project timelines can be very, very tight. And I know certainly here, I would say a big difference between here and in the UK for project programming is that we don't have enough time up front to do the thinking part. We're not given the privilege of thinking about our designs early on, which you have a more set process in the UK, a more realistic program.
Yeah.
But even so, it takes very long hours to deliver it because ultimately, I would say the fee level that is being received for the amount of work that goes into delivering a project doesn't equal that amount of work. You're not recompensed at the project level to run the whole of the project team, so that everyone can have the level of recompense individually that they deserve for the hours of hard work and time and effort. And of course, I suppose everything that goes into it, we're not paid enough. We're all devalued across the scale. It's in architecture, and I think it's the devaluation of the profession, perhaps, that we should also be fighting for. Not just the hours of work. Why are we perceived that we're not considered to be worthy of that level of fee income, that level of pay? Yeah, I think that's probably take it up a different level as well.
Well, I'm glad.
So I'm total agreement, but there's other factors as well we need to question and challenge.
I think you've put an important point with and this is probably one of the real reasons why I want to have those conversations with people who practice in different countries, because there's a perception, I think it's very much in the UK, that you think going to the UAE you'll be paid humongous amounts of money, and I think the reality is you're all struggling with the same things that we are with them, the tight fees, the tight timescales. So really interesting to hear,
Yeah, it's a global challenge, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. My next one is what are the biggest challenges that you face running and leading working in a practice? That I guess the main day-to-day challenges that you have. I mean, you've mentioned time. So is there any other big challenges that you're facing?
Time, definitely. That's the major one. There's never enough time to do everything, no matter what the size of your team is, because of course, when you're running a practice, you're running how your practice deals with clients. You're running how your practice deals with regulatory bodies, the local authorities, how your practice deals with running your own design team and any sub-consultants that may be required. And then you start thinking of the actual design, which is what I'm in there for from the first place. I mean, that's why I became an architect. That's why many of us have become an architect. And that part of the process gets squeezed and squeezed and squeezed because you're spending your time doing things to other people's timescales, answering other people's queries and questions so that they can get on and do their work. And then doing your own work is left to the end of the day when there's no more questions coming in and no one else is pulling you for your time. That's a major part of the challenges of running a practice, I would say. And also, not every client's an educated client. So whenever someone approaches you to do something, sometimes, certainly in this part of the world, they come to you and say, you're the consultant, you tell us what we need. That's very difficult. The briefing process is the most critical part of any project. You need to get the briefing process correct before you can decide what the solution is, because that's where the questions lie, in the brief. Once you know what the question is, then you can come up with an answer. And architecture is all about delivering answers, delivering solutions. So the briefing process needs to be, there's room for much improvement here, definitely, in briefing. And I'm sure it's not that dissimilar in UK. Not all clients are educated. Not all clients are working to what's needed. I think currently as well, we touched on regulations. Currently, everyone, all across the world, perhaps majority of countries are working towards decarbonisation targets, which for the built environment for us, it means low carbon design, low carbon delivery of projects, net zero carbon or nearly carbon, whatever's achievable in whatever areas. Here is it's very difficult to have net zero materials. Most of our materials are imported. So we've got transportation carbon to deal with when we do our calculations for our building designs and our end of all everything that goes into thinking about it. We have added carbon costs that we wouldn't necessarily have if we were in the centre of a much larger area that has resources more readily available. And then going back to regulations, where this is the minimum standard. At the moment, the standards do not meet net zero targets at all. There's no standards because net zero has just come so recently that any regulations we're working with, any sustainable design standards, etc., here in Dubai or in Abu Dhabi, they weren't conceived in the time when net zero idealism was being considered. So there's a disconnect between what we're being told we must meet, the regulations we must meet, and the regulations that we need to meet in order to deliver buildings that are future-proofed, essentially. So getting that across to clients is very difficult as well. Some clients, they're very well educated, they're the top of the game, and they represent like global brands or large government departments who are pushing for decarbonisation, and in many cases, some of your clients are pushing to be seen as achieving net zero or low carbon, etc., etc. But most of your clients aren't. The majority of your clients, what's net zero? Why do I have to consider it? So you've really got to sort of take that outside of the conversation and not mention it to them, and to deliver a low carbon design or a net zero carbon design without them having bought into delivering net zero, because it just needs to be normalized and standardized as this is the way we design today. So this is the solution for your brief, for your needs, for your project. And so that's another challenge today, that not everything's connected and aligned yet. And so that's going to take time. So that everyone's got the same hymn sheet to sing from, I suppose.
This next question may be you may have answered it. It was just to understand your biggest frustration, and I think you've answered it. But maybe anything else to add about just, a really frustrating aspect of practicing architecture where you are?
My frustration is the time and not being allowed enough time front end to do the design thinking. We come up with some fabulous, innovative solutions. I could just imagine what those solutions could look like if we were given that extra time, the real time at the front that we do need to deliver the best solution that can be done, basically. And I think it's the same for anybody in this part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to add that even within the industry I work in, that's been a recognizing factor. And now we spend much more time in what we call studies phase, which I know is a luxury, but it does really have them benefits. We get the right brief, the right funding, and it makes projects run so much more smoother. So yeah, time is definitely critical.
It is, yeah.
The last two questions I have is, how is social media used to benefit your business, or is it just an individual tool that you people who work at the practice use?
Yeah, I think as a business we don't use this to its maximum potential at all. We could do with looking at that and trying that. At the moment, it's individual use. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I did have a head of digital at one point who was advising me and giving me this program and do this and do this and do this. I often failed and I was often told off. So I was deemed a lost cause. But I think there are others who would be much more better at doing that than I, certainly. And as a company, as an organization, everything's digital these days. So we do need to look at how we produce that better. And I think that my primary media content would be my LinkedIn page. And essentially, that's about the maximum I would do, and that's where I share the events that are going on and the things that we've completed and what we're interested in and programs that we're looking at, etc. But beyond that, I really don't use any social media, and the company doesn't use social media to anywhere near its potential.
It'd be interesting to know to look at that. If that would increase your client base or maybe have different clients if you used that impact. It's some practices do it very successfully, I think, and I always like the ones that are punching above their weight. They're very small, and then they embrace that social media. But you're right, it doesn't sound like, for me, listening to what you've said so far, that you necessarily need that presence, yet you are winning projects and have got a healthy workload.
Yes, I mean, our client base so far is our generation, so it's working for us. But for the future, to future-proof the practice, we must look to how we can grow our digital presence. Really must.
Yeah, understand that. No, okay. My final question then is, what is the best thing about practicing architecture in your country?
For me, I do something, I do it once, and I practically never do the same thing twice. Every day is different. The exciting thing for me is that whatever project I'm working on is the most important thing I've ever done. It's the most important thing that I can focus on at the time. But the project I'm working on today, I have no idea of what that project is, but it will come in tomorrow and it'll be equally as exciting, equally as pushing boundaries and looking for innovation and creativity. And so I think, whether that's specific to this country, I think maybe it is, because we get to do so many different kinds of work.
Thank you for listening. Please support the Global Architect Alliance by subscribing and sharing this podcast. Please also leave a rating. For more information of what the Global Architect Alliance does, please visit globalarchitectalliance.com. We will see you next time.